All right, part two. So this is a lesson. And in this lesson, I'm going to talk about something that we have been unable to avoid for the past month, if not longer. So there's a lot of fear associated with what is going on in the world. And in some cases, there's also quite a bit of indifference where people wonder why they're being asked to socially isolate, practice social distancing, why they cannot go out and hang out with their friends. And it so happens that a part of the learning of our grade 10 course is looking at how public health strategies are implemented to protect us from dangerous diseases that can hurt us. So here we are with a perfect opportunity to explore this latest tiny little virus that is changing every aspect of our lives. Now, in order to help you feel hopefully more comfortable about the unknown, we're going to break down a little bit of the unknown here. So in this presentation, in this lesson, you do not need to know all these details. This is just a way for us to kind of segue into our course to something that's relevant, that's happening in the world right now. And by the end of this week, you should know more about coronavirus and COVID than when you started. So when we look at the coronavirus, we know that currently there is no vaccine. We know that the outbreak started in 2019 in China, and we know that the COVID-19 virus is a part of the family of coronaviruses. The coronaviruses are not new. We've been seeing these for a very long time. As a matter of fact, the coronavirus is responsible for a number of the colds, as well as for SARS, as well as for MERS. So these are other epidemic-like viruses that had a huge impact on the local population, and in the case of SARS, it went quite global. So what I'd like to do is I would like to use a New York Times website. And I want to use this website because I want to use tools that you're able to access easily. And so with the New York Times here, they've done an excellent job of explaining how the coronavirus attacks you, what it actually does. So let me just pull over the website here so we can see this properly together. And as we scroll down here, the SARS-CoV-19 coronavirus is so named because of the little pegs that stick out that make it look like a crown. And we know that there are a number of different coronaviruses that have infected humans, as I just mentioned. SARS and MERS are two of the ones that have happened over the past 20 years that have caused, unfortunately, a lot of death as well. So this very distinctive shape of the coronavirus allows us to determine that it belongs to this particular family. And because it belongs to this family, it tells us a little bit of information about how this virus operates, which means that even though it's novel and has never existed before, because it belongs to that family, scientists and researchers have a better understanding of how they could combat this virus because they've looked at it and done research on it before. These spikes that are on the outside of the coronavirus, what they will do is they will have they're like a lock and key. So on the outside of our cell membranes, we have these little receptors. And these spikes on the outside of the virus, they act like keys. And so they match the receptor. If they match the right receptor, then the virus is able to enter into your cells. And it so happens that these cells can be anywhere inside your body. Typically, this virus enters in through the nose, mouth, eyes. Once it's inside your cell, this is something we talk about in much more detail in the grade 11 biology course. Once it's inside your cell, the cell will create a protective coating around the virus, and the virus will then release its RNA. So the virus uses a slightly different genetic material than what we're used to. We're used to seeing DNA in all living organisms. As far as the definition we're going to use of life in Suzuki science, the virus is not alive, but it has the ability to co-opt living cells and make them do their bidding. So the viral RNA, in the case of the coronavirus, is released from the virus, and it's able to go into the cell and insert a little tiny piece of genetic material into the host. This viral DNA is able to take over the host cell. When you look at the genome, our DNA inside the human, so we talked about the chromosomes already earlier in the course in the cells unit, we have 3 billion letters. That's a huge number. A virus has 30,000. There's no comparison in the size. However, that small little size is able to completely redirect the role of that cell. Some people talk about using antibiotics. The antibiotics are designed for killing bacteria, something we talk about much more in grade 11. They do not work against viruses. If you want to work against virus, then you need to use antiviral drugs. Okay, so here is the virus. It's inside your cell. It's co-opted the cell. It's affecting the endoplasmic reticulum. It's inside the nucleus. It's doing all sorts of things. And what it does is it causes the cell to, instead of twitching like muscles or communicating like nervous signals or producing insulin or whatever a cell is supposed to do, it causes the cell to produce viral proteins. And these viral proteins will be assembled inside your cell to produce brand new viruses. So these viruses are created inside your cell, and then they are released by the cell. The cell becomes a viral factory, and it's ejected into our bloodstream. And now you have all these viruses that are now able to infect other cells in the same way that original virus did. So you have this cascading effect. Now, all seems doom and gloom, but luckily we have an immune system. And so our immune response is to find these foreign invaders and to destroy them. Now, the way that the virus infects your cells, it requires a special type of immune cell in order to fight it and destroy those cells. And one of the special transmitters that's going to allow this to happen, let's move off this slide here, is something known as the cytokines. So for most of you, 4 out of 5 people, your immune system is going to win. It's going to take a little while. You're going to have fevers and aches and you're going to feel ill, but your immune system, it's going to win. In that time that your body's trying to figure out this virus and destroy it, however, you're contagious. And often, right at the very beginning, you don't even realize you have the virus. And so you're able to spread it to other people. And so it leaves your body. You cough, hopefully into your elbow, but you cough and you sneeze and you have all this viral laden stuff in the air around you, and it'll land on people beside you, it'll land on doorknobs, it'll land on phones, and if someone else is to come into that cloud of virus droplets, then it can enter in their nose, their mouth, their eyes. If you touch something that has those droplets on it and then start touching your face, then it can enter into your body. And that's how it's transmitted. Now, as I said before, your immune system, for most of you, 100 people, 80 of you, your immune system, good to go, done. And the immune system is really complex. We talk about it in grade 12 biology. And so there's a whole bunch of cells that are recruited and they come in and they destroy. But one of the jobs of the immune system as well is it releases these cytokines. And the cytokines, many jobs. One of the jobs is to tell the cells that are infected to commit suicide so that they don't infect any more cells. This is a word called apoptosis. So that's that word you can use at the dinner table today. And this apoptosis is generally okay. But sometimes, in some people, the immune system doesn't work the way we want it to. It goes into this roller coaster effect where the cells will die, but too many die too quickly. And they release a lot of cytokines, these infected cells. They also release more cytokines that cause more immune cells to come in, that causes more cytokine to be released, that causes more cells to die. You get inflammation inside your body, and then you have this major volume of cytokines released, and this is a storm. It's called the cytokine storm. And so the cytokine storm, it will, typically in the case of the coronavirus, the COVID-19, it will affect your lungs. And so your lungs will be completely decimated. They'll fill up with a lot of fluid, and other problems will occur. Eventually, if this cytokine storm is not stopped, you'll end up with a lot of your organs failing. So I'll show you this link here. So here's an example of the acute respiratory distress syndrome. Here's your normal alveoli. We talked about that in grade 11, and we talk about it in grade 10. And here is what is not supposed to happen. So you'll see that the alveoli, these little tiny air sacs, fill up with liquid. This is a result of the cytokine storm. Your body's not able to deal with the problem. And so when your alveoli, these little air sacs in your lungs, fill up with liquid, it's like you're drowning. This is the pneumonia that you've probably heard about in the news. So at this moment in time, if you are part of that 20%, then you're probably hospitalized. And so they'll give you lots of fluids because you're sweating out a lot. They'll give you painkillers because you're probably in pain. Fever reducers to bring down your temperature, because if it gets too high, your cells will not be happy and they'll start to die. And they'll give you antibiotics because your immune system is really weak. And so other bacteria that are not related to the coronavirus might come in and make you sick. So you get antibiotics. At the moment in time, there is no vaccine. The flu that you typically get the flu shot for is completely unrelated. We have a vaccine for that. The coronavirus, we do not, and that's what they're working on. If you're extremely serious, then in addition to all those, they'll give you a ventilator because your lungs are failing, and so they give you a ventilator that will breathe for you. Unfortunately, the ventilators there's a finite number. There are not really that many of them in the grand scheme of the number of people are getting sick that you've seen in Italy and in Spain and Germany and Indonesia and other parts of the world. So what can we do? So that's kind of the purpose here, to give you some hope. Remember that Inukshuk at the beginning. So there are really 3 prongs that we're looking at in terms of fixing this problem. And a lot of different research companies, a lot of different organizations, a lot of different governments, the WHO are working on all 3 of these. There's trials in place right now as we speak. One of them are the antiviral medications. And these antiviral medications, it's exactly like it sounds. It's kind of like the viral antibiotic. And their job is to stop the virus from making copies of itself. One of the very promising drugs is a drug called Remdesivir. And Remdesivir was originally designed to be used against Ebola. So you might remember the Ebola scare that we had not too long ago. And Ebola is a virus, and it copies itself incredibly quickly, and it kills people in a matter of days. And so they designed this drug, and it was ineffective. It didn't work against Ebola. But they did find that when they were playing around with this drug and doing some research, that the SARS and MERS coronaviruses, they seem to be affected by this Remdesivir. And so there's a lot of promise that this drug might work. This is the number 1 drug that researchers think might work currently as of April 1st, 2020. Another drug that you might have heard about from Mr. Trump south of the border, he talked about this thing called chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine. And this was a drug that was originally designed to kill malaria, the parasite that causes malaria. Once again, it was excellent for its time, but then the parasite developed a resistance to it, as often happens. Grade 11 bio, we've talked about this quite a bit already. And so it's no longer useful. So we got lots and lots of these boxes of these antivirals that aren't being used. And in a very small sample of 26 people that China ran, these French people ran, as well as a group in China. They found that of the 26 people, their level of the coronavirus in their blood system was much less. So that's very promising. But the study is extremely small, and there's a lot of very small studies that do not translate into larger populations. We don't know if it's a placebo effect or there's something else going on. So it's very early, very, very early and premature to say that this is the solution. Mr. Trump heard it and he announced it in the Twitter in a big news feed, and then the next day several people found this chloroquine that's used to as a detox for beta tanks and things like that. They took it and they've died. People actually died the day after he announced it, even though he should not have. The next prong, apart from antivirals, is antibody generation. So your body produces antibodies when you're sick. And typically you're sick for a short period of time. Your body is able to create these antibodies. Then the antibodies find the virus and they code it, and your immune system is able to destroy it. So if we can produce these antibodies, then we might be able to solve the problem. In Vancouver, there's a company called AbCellera, and they actually are one of the first companies to start the analysis of the COVID virus, and they found many different proteins. There's probably hundreds of thousands of proteins, and they're able to narrow it down to a couple of hundred, I believe, or 50. And those are the ones that are likely to be really good candidates to develop an antibody. You may have also heard of them using people who've recovered from the virus. Their blood is very rich in antibodies, using their blood to give to very sick people. And then because they have the antibodies in their blood, the sick people can potentially get better. Once again, this is very new. They've used it in the past, this technique that was worked really well for polio and Ebola and the previous SARS epidemic. Currently, there's a number of trials that the WHO is sponsoring, as well as a lot of governments, so they're giving it a try. We're doing it here in Ontario as well, and we'll see what happens. Think of a big sponge that goes in and just sucks up a whole bunch of viruses. So that's very promising as well. And of course, the third prong is that cytokine storm I was talking about. If you can stop the cytokine storm, then this could be the solution. Roche is a pharmaceutical company, and they produce this particular drug. And this drug was able to stop a cytokine storm for rheumatoid arthritis. And they believe that it might also be able to do the same thing for the COVID virus. So that's another place where a lot of research companies are doing some studies. Okay. You know that at the moment, the best way to prevent is the social distancing, so you don't get sneezed on. And if you touch anything, or even if you don't, just every time you go outside, you wash your hands. Soap is a proven, very effective deterrent for destroying the virus. The soap and the virus have very different properties, and those properties will cause the virus coat to basically be interrupted and destroy the virus and prevent you from getting sick. So always wash your hands with soap, and singing the alphabet song or whatever it happens to be is a very effective way to stay healthy.